Reptilians, welcome back to my channel. So this week I am still recovering from being sick last week, so if my voice is going in and out, that is why. And I am recording 3 videos today, so the next 3 videos you get to listen to my voice sounding like this. So sorry. Anyway, today we're gonna look at a question that I get all the time, and that is captive bred versus wild caught animals. Now this video isn't going to be my personal views on these two types of animals, and it's not going to be morality or ethics or anything behind it. This is more of a beginner's guide for people that may have never gone to a reptile show before or are just now getting into reptile keeping that may not know what the difference when buying the two are and why you might choose one over the other. So we're just going to dive into things like price and health of the animals and things like that. Before we get started, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by the Dubia Dude, so make sure to stay until the end of this video to find out how you can save 10% off of your order at thedubiadude.com. So first off, let's define those things. So when you go to a reptile expo, a lot of times they will have markings on the deli cups or the display cases or whatever those animals are being kept in. Usually they're not going to be on things like bearded dragons, leopard geckos, corn snakes, ball pythons, because in the United States those things are generally captive bred. It's actually pretty rare to find wild caughts of those things because of the exportation process from those countries being super illegal. So for the most part, this isn't going to pertain to those things, but if you are walking around an expo and you see WC or CB or CBB, you need to know what those things mean. So first of all, WC stands for wild caught. Wild caught animals are just as they sound. They are animals that are gathered from their natural environments and imported into the United States or whatever country it is that you live in. Those animals are going directly from the wild to that seller, and they are going directly to you. CBB would mean captive born and bred, meaning that that is an animal that was born to 2 captive bred adults, which is how, again, here in the United States, almost all bearded dragons, ball pythons, leopard geckos, things like that are going to fall into that category. The last one we're going to look at is if an animal is marked CB. This one is super tricky, and this is one that you need to pay attention to. CB has 2 different meanings. Sometimes it is meant to mean captive bred, which would be the same thing as CBB, meaning that it is an animal that was bred and born in captivity. However, sometimes people will use that to mean captive born, and captive born means that one of the wild caught animals that was imported just happened to be gravid, and so she had those babies in captivity. So the babies were born in captivity, but the mother was still bred in the wild. It wasn't the result of calculated breeding, and a lot of times those animals are basically going to be the same as wild caught animal in terms of temperament and things, and we will get to that in a little bit. But those are the 3 main definitions of how animals are usually going to be marked at reptile expos or auctions or anything like that. And I always recommend captive bred, captive born and bred animals for anyone that is just getting into reptiles, because they are overall going to be the healthiest. Again, we're going to get to all that, but just know that personally I always recommend looking for captive bred if you are not an experienced keeper. Moving on to the price of these animals, this is the huge reason that a lot of people will go wild caught. This is the biggest reason that I am making this video, and this is the biggest reason that people often will get wild caught animals and not know it at reptile shows. Wild caught animals are super cheap when compared to captive bred animals. So just as an example off the top of my head, blue tongue skinks, if you go to an expo and they have Indonesian blue tongue skinks, 99% of the time those are going to be wild caught skinks, and they're usually around $140, $150. My blue tongue skink was $300, and that is because he was a captive bred animal. So you can see that a captive bred animal is double the price of a wild caught animal. So if you have never been to an expo before and you go and there's a table with a blue tongue skink that's $150 and there's a table with a blue tongue skink that's $300 and you're new to all this, of course you're gonna go for that $150 $150 animal because they're probably gonna look about the same. So that is the reason that I'm making this video, because I feel like it is a common issue. And honestly, a lot of times you have to kind of be lucky for the seller of those reptiles to even tell you if they're wild caught. I have been to a few expos where they are marked wild caught, captive bred, whatever on the displays, but more often than not, they're not marked at all. So that is something that you wouldn't know if you were just getting to that. So yeah, price, wild caught is going to be so much cheaper than captive bred. This is another huge difference between captive bred and wild caught animals. The health of those animals is going to vary greatly. And this is another huge reason that I often suggest captive bred animals for beginners, because this makes a difference. So if you are getting an animal that is fresh out of the wild, they are bringing in all those parasites. They are going to have numerous internal parasites. Some may even have external parasites like mites and even ticks, and they also can have injuries. There are so many times I go to reptile expos and I'm looking at these animals and you can see that they have visible injuries, whether their faces are scratched up or snuffed up. They have leg injuries, tail injuries, they'll have gashes in their body. And not only are all of those things harmful to that animal, but all of those things warrant vet visits. So that price of that $150 skink has now risen up to $300-400 because you are having to take them to the vet, you are having to get them medications and treat all that. And if you are new to owning reptiles, giving your brand new animal medications every day, or just taking them to the vet and having to have them looked at and being told that they have all these parasites or an infection or anything like that, that's going to be very stressful. So that is why I recommend new people get captive bred animals. But yes, if you are going to get a wild caught animal from a show, just keep in mind they're not going to be as healthy as a captive bred animal, and you will need to take them to the vet. And even if you are purposely getting a wild caught animal, it's still very important that you ask the seller if it's wild caught, so that you know that you do need to go ahead and make that vet appointment for them, or that you do need to go ahead and collect a fecal sample to take it in and get them appropriately treated for whatever kind of parasites that they may have. Species availability. So this isn't going to apply as much to the people that are new to keeping reptiles. This really comes in with experienced keepers who are wanting new and different species of reptiles, and even rarer species of reptiles. And that is the fact that certain species are only available as wild caught animals, or they are very rarely offered as captive bred. So all reptiles that we keep today were at some point wild caught. So a lot of times people will purposely buy animals that are wild caught, like for example satanic leaf-tailed geckos, which aren't as readily available as captive bred animals, or savanna monitors. Most of those are also wild caught animals because those animals don't really want to breed in captivity. So a lot of times people will buy a pair of those with the sole intent of being able to breed them over time and have their own line of captive bred animals and make those available to the public as pets. So that's why sometimes at reptile shows you will see animals that you have never seen before, and they are beautiful, and a lot of times they will be sold in pairs for that very reason, to further the bloodline in captivity. But yeah, if you are one of those people that really wants some crazy exotic species of whatever, then a lot of times your only choice is going to be wild caught, and then that kind of just depends on you and what you want to do. But yeah, just know that a lot of the more exotic species of reptiles are only available as wild caught animals. The age of the animal. So if you are wanting to get a smaller reptile and have them for a very long time and watch them grow up and all that, you're not really going to be able to do that with a wild caught animal, because the people that have imported those animals won't know how old they are. Those animals just come in as adult blue-tongued skink, adult Indonesian blue-tongued skink, or whatever it is. So you are getting an animal that you have no idea how old it is. This is very concerning for for animals like chameleons, many chameleons have very short lifespans. For all you know, you might have a year with that animal. So if that is something that you are looking at, if you're looking for an animal to go on an entire life journey with, then you're not going to be able to do that with a wild caught where you would with a captive bred, because the person is standing right there that has bred them. So that is another thing that is up to you and up to what you are looking for, but just another thing that I felt important to point out. And another huge difference is going to be the temperament. So this is something that is going to be more important in reptiles that you want to get to handle. So if we're looking at a vine snake, that's an animal that you can't handle because they're so fragile. So this point doesn't really matter as much in those kinds of species. But if we're looking again at things like blue-tongued skinks, and I only use that as an example because there's always so many that are wild caught and that are not telling people that they're wild caught, sold at expos. This also goes for things like your mastics, which are very often wild caught. Fire skinks are another one. Any of those kinds of animals, their temperament is going to be vastly different if they are wild caught versus captive bred. And the reasoning for that is if they are wild caught, that animal is fresh out of the wild. Its whole life has been spent surviving. So it is always in fight or flight mode. If you reach into a tank with a wild-caught blue-tongued skink, it is more likely to bite you or run or just try to get away from you in some way than a captive bred would be. And a captive bred is more likely to be a little bit more calm, a little bit more willing to eat out of your hand or be held or anything like that, because it has grown up its entire life being around humans. It was hatched and there was a human there. It was helped out of its eggs sometimes by a human. It was fed from day one by a human. So its entire life has been being around humans and interacting with humans. So you can kind of see how that temperament would vastly differ among the two. Now, I am not saying that if you get a wild-caught animal that you will never be able to tame it down, because that's just not true, but it will take a lot more patience and effort and practice with that animal as opposed to a captive bred animal. But that is all I got. Again, this video is not meant to say that one way or the other is incorrect. I'm just pointing out the differences that beginners to expos should look for when they go to expos to get animals, because these aren't really things that are told to people. Like I said, a lot of those sellers will not tell you if it is a wild-caught animal. I know that when I very first got into reptiles and I was going to these expos, it would absolutely blow me away that you could get an animal for half the price over here than over here, and I didn't realize why until I actually researched into it. So I just wanted to let some of you guys know that may not know that difference. Like I said at the beginning of this video is sponsored by the Dubia Dude. TheDubiaDude.com is an awesome place to get feeder roaches for your animals. Dubia roaches are super healthy. They are super high in protein. They are much easier to care for and much cleaner than crickets, and they are more filling than crickets as well, so you have to feed less of those to your animal for them to get full. The Dubia Dude's website is also super easy to navigate. Just a couple of clicks and you have Dubia roaches coming directly to your house, which is super cool, super convenient. He also does his best to reduce, reuse, and recycle, so not only are you getting super healthy roaches for your animals, but you are also contributing to saving the environment, which is awesome as well. Don't forget to use my code Elle at thedubiadude.com to save 10% off of your entire order. Thank you so much to the Dubia Dude for sponsoring this video. But yeah, that is all I have for this week. Again, not attacking anyone that may keep wild caught or that may be super against wild caught. I am just kind of a firm believer in doing what you feel is morally and ethically right for you. As long as you put in the time and research and you make a decision based on what you think is right, then that's it, guys. As always, if you're not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday. Huge thank yous and shout outs to Tanya Diedrich for following me on Instagram and going through and liking a whole bunch of stuff. Thank you so much, Tanya. You are the bee's knees. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.